Thank you, Kaisa, for inviting me to hold this presentation. Today's topic is edible forest garden, and it relates to Alman. We have just recently started a new forest garden project, so I will tell about that. But first, let's go to the forest garden concept in general. So what is a edible forest garden? It's a multi-layered and diverse garden, and it's modeled to mimic natural woodland and also kept at that stage. The title suggests that it's a forest, but it's not a forest. It's more like an open canopy, like savanna type of environment, because it's multi-layered. The idea is that the canopy lets light through to these other layers, like ground cover plants and smaller bushes and perennials. This kind of multi-layered system has been traditionally cultivated in especially tropics and subtropics over 10,000 years, actually. So it's very long. It has very long tradition. Up here in higher latitudes, it's relatively new concept. British Robert Hart brought edible forest garden concept from India about 40 years ago. He started his own forest garden in England, just small plot like 500 square meters, but it was very influential and inspired many to continue experiments. The multi-layered thing means that it has useful trees, shrubs, climbers, perennials, and ground cover plants, plus also fungi and animals can be also incorporated in the system. It's part of agroforestry. Agroforestry is like an umbrella concept for this kind of combinations of useful plants and animals and cultivation. The aim is to mimic natural ecosystems, take the benefits from natural ecosystems. Everybody knows that the forest grows by itself. It doesn't need any fertilizer or pesticides. It doesn't need cultivation. It doesn't need much like human input. It just grows and produces biomass by itself, just using sun, air, water, and nutrients from the soil. It works. Whereas our agriculture is quite dependent on external inputs. The benefit of agriculture is that it produces lots of food, but the cost is high. It needs very much inputs and work, fossil fuels and such things. Okay, next slide, please. Here's a photograph of a quite typical food forest, edible forest garden. You can see the layered structure here. The central tree that's a mulberry, and below there's a couple of berry bushes and edible perennial plants. This is from Sweden, actually. You can also see it's not like forest kind of environment. It's more like a garden, or the tree canopies don't touch each other. They are more the canopy needs to be wider, the space beneath the canopy, so that the light can go to the understory layers. Okay, next one, please. So why to grow a forest garden? Well, the simple answer is that we need to save the world. We can't continue making parks with purely ornamental plants. That's my personal opinion. That's kind of waste of resources. We also can't continue this kind of agriculture we are now doing. The benefits of forest garden is the sustainability of it. It's very sustainable, and I need to explain why. Sustainability is often misused, and yeah, but forest garden, I find that's truly sustainable. One reason is that it sequesters carbon very efficiently. The many layers capture the solar energy quite well, and sequester the carbon to these plants and the roots. There's also new research about this topic that shows that it's very much more efficient in sequestering carbon than annual wheat field, for example. I learned about that study this year. It's relatively new thing, but it makes sense. The other reason is that there's minimal soil disturbance because the plants are perennial. We don't have to dig all the time and sow seeds like in normal vegetable plot. No tilling, minimal soil disturbance. Also minimal machine use. It's more like a hunter-gatherer environment, place for foraging, than a garden of, let's say, well, normal carrots and potatoes and such annual biennial species. We don't use much machines in forest gardens. We mimic ecosystems, which means the forest garden is very diverse and very good habitat for other animals and insects and yeah, natural things like that. High species diversity. In structural terms, it has many layers. It's diverse in structure. There's many species. It's quite normal. Forest garden has like 100 or 200 plant species. So very many kind of different plants, very many niches for different insects, for example. No need to use pesticides or herbicides. There's maybe some holes in some leaves, but every single being in the forest garden, like in nature, they are food for something else. That's just normal being part of the chain. Diversity also helps to balance different things like diseases and pest attacks. Normal forest, healthy forest, doesn't have normally like big problems with pests. It's balanced. There's also species that eat the pest, let's say. And part of forest garden should be devoted to native wild plants always. We can't just put apple trees and some ribes berry bushes and that kind of garden plants. We also need wild plants. We also need to let nature kind of take over a little bit more than in annual vegetable plots. Because the native plants are very important to bringing this ecosystem function to the forest garden. Some ecologists say that about 30% of forest garden area should be devoted to native plants. For example, in my forest garden, the nettles and fireweed and raspberries, they can just wildly go where they like and kind of take their place. One important thing is to understand the efficiency in this kind of multi-strata, multi-layered system. We are quite used to growing plants in very intensive places like annual vegetable plots or agricultural fields. And they need quite a lot of work. They need lots of time from gardener or farmer. Not only time, but also resources like using tractors and machines and things that run on with fossil fuels. But as I said, the input is high, but also the output is high often. Forest gardens are a little bit different. The input is maybe not that high. It's low or moderate. We don't have to use so much energy to grow trees. They just grow. And when they start to produce, like apples or nuts, they can produce for 100 years without much of human input. So the output is quite high or moderate in forest gardens. And that makes it efficient. We don't have to work much, but we still get a decent yield. Not very high, not super high, but a decent, moderate yield at least, quite easily. And yeah, why forest gardens? Well, I see forest garden as very close to paradise in a way. There's lots of different plants, there's birds, there's insects, there's life. And it's not a monoculture. There's always something interesting that's happening. Something is flowering, something is giving harvest. There's some interesting meeting with the bird, for example. It's very different than in a normal garden, vegetable garden, let's say. And yeah, if you look at this sustainability title and the words beneath that, they are quite similar than in nature. No one is stealing in nature. It sequesters carbon quite effectively, like forest. The diversity is often high. It's good habitat. No one is using herbicides. We try to mimic that and combine, kind of change the natural species with useful plants. Not all, but about 70%. We also need to plant some plants that are not directly useful to people, to humans. These are called system plants or support plants, plants that have indirect use for humans. Plants that fix nitrogen from atmosphere, for example, and fertilize other plants. Plants that attract bumblebees, for example. We need pollinators in our gardens. Plants that are food for insects, that are food for other insects, that make the system an ecosystem. These kind of indirect useful plants we also need. Plants that break wind, that make microclimate more favorable for our harvest plants. For example, fruit trees benefit if there isn't too much wind, because the pollinators like to hang around in that kind of spots which are warm and nice, especially here in the north. In our climate, that's very important to create a microclimate that's warmer than the surrounding areas. Okay, next one, please. Essi, can you change the slide, please? Okay, some features. So thin canopy, only 10 to 50% coverage that allows sun to go to ground cover layer and perennial layer and shrubs. Ground cover is quite important. We need 100% coverage to the ground layer. Otherwise, if there's bare soil, it's always an invitation for weeds to take over. And weeds can be good guys, but weeds are also problematic sometimes. It's a complicated relationship, let's say. More like savanna than a dense forest. Natural forest has lots of competition in it. Plants go high up, they want to reach the sun, and they grow very thickly, very close to each other. And they grow lots of wood and only small canopies, so that's a bit problematic. We need more open area to make the system productive. We need to think our needs as well, not just insects' needs. We need food. So, forest garden is a no-dig system, quite more or less. Of course, we need to plant trees and make some holes, but more or less. We need to focus on beneficial interactions between species to make it ecosystem-like and get the ecosystem's benefits. I will show some examples later. Okay, I don't see that in the on the bottom of the slide, I don't see, but I think I remember I wrote that there's many different yields in the forest garden, not just food, also some other yields like fuel. We can grow firewood, some medicinal plants, some fodder plants for animals, also some fiber plants, plants for basketry, plants for making colors, and that kind of stuff. Also fertilizers, as I mentioned, these nitrogen fixer trees, for example. I don't see the lowest text actually, but I will need to check my own slide here. It's difficult to commercialize actually forest garden because there's so many yields. There's apples, there's berries, there's nuts, there's pine cones, there's whatever there is, herbaceous perennials, perennial vegetables, and so on. It's very difficult to make a commercial system out of that. So often forest gardens are educational places or aim to increase self-sufficiency of a family, for example. Just like in traditional societies 10,000 years ago, families were dependent on surroundings and the garden they had outside, where they foraged everything they needed, actually. That was like a supermarket, just the outside surroundings. Okay, next one, please. Yeah, so finally a picture. Here's some harvests, some yields I got from my forest garden. There's elderflowers, there's blue honeysuckle berries, there's hosta shoots, there's some grape wine and apples and nuts and basket materials. I grow willows and I make baskets. I'm concentrated on nuts, growing different nuts at here, upper latitudes, and it seems that the nuts grow quite well, so I need baskets as well. Okay, next one, please. Here's one example of a beneficial interaction. Siberian pea tree gives edible pods, edible seed. That's good if you boil them. It's also favored by bumblebees early June. Its yellow flowers attract lots of pollinators, especially bumblebees. And the one thing that this heartnut needs is nitrogen. It really likes to have lots of nutrients, especially nitrogen. And Siberian pea tree fixes that to its roots with bacteria that lives in some symbiosis with the roots. So Siberian pea tree benefits the heartnut, and heartnut is very ornamental, plus the nut is very good and healthy. This kind of interactions we try to create like intentionally. Next one, please. Okay, now I present 3+1 forest gardens. Next one. This is the famous forest garden of, it's Martin Crawford's lifetime's work in southern England, in Devon. It was started in 1994, I think, almost 30 years ago. I visited there twice, last time 8-9 years ago when I took a weekend course with Martin. Here you can see the layered structure. These higher trees are Italian alder here in the center part of the picture and on the right side. Italian alder, nitrogen fixer. Below there's some smaller trees and some bigger bushes, then some smaller shrubs and perennials and ground cover plants. It's relatively open. The left side, there's a wild or cultivated conifer forest. That's not part of the forest garden, but it has a function. Martin selected this site because the existing conifer forest offered wind protection. And in UK, wind protection is one of the first priorities you need. That's an island in the Atlantic and there's always wind. wind coming. So wind shelter makes the place more warm and plants grow faster. Next one, please. So this is the interior part of Martin's forest garden. On the left side, you can see some rubus species, some raspberry species. This is more like a ground cover plant he's using. Then there's a path and some edible, mostly edible perennials. I see sweet Sicily and cardoon, and then there's some berries, I think, and also this fern, ostrich fern, that's edible in spring. Next one, please. Here's the master forest gardener himself, Martin Crawford. He's showing how he's pollarded this lime tree. Pollarding means that you cut it and it regrows again. He's pollarded the lime tree because he's using the lime leaves as a salad crop. That's a very good base ingredient for salads. It's very tasty. It doesn't have any bitter taste. It's very kind of sweet and nutty, the flavor. He's growing hardy kiwi vine, Actinidia species, in very close proximity to this lime tree. And at the same time, when he pollards the lime, he also cuts the kiwi, because the kiwi is very vigorous and it can grow like 50-meter high. He does this pollarding every 5 years or something. Yeah, lime tree is really one of my favorites too. Okay, next one, please. Then we go to Sweden. Martin Crawford is very influential. He wrote this book, Creating a Forest Garden, like 12 years ago, and quite many people went to his courses, also these Swedes, about already 20 years ago. They created this Holma forest garden that was started in 2004. It's in southern Sweden, near Skåne. It's the zone 2 in Sweden. So a little bit different plants grow there than we have here. They have quince, for example. We can't grow quince, Gudonia oblonga, up here in Finland. Maybe you Central Europeans can grow these kind of plants easily, but we have a bit different selection here. So Holma Forest Garden is used for education quite a lot. There's a folk high school. They go there every week, the students, to do various tasks and kind of take care of the place. Here you can see the quite open structure of Holma Forest Garden. There's these clearings and gaps and openings where annual cultivation is also practiced. Here students are building some kind of support structure for beams, these runner beams or pole beams. So forest garden is a perennial system, but of course there's areas where it's not more light. There's no problem. You can use you can grow carrots in forest garden. That's okay. I personally grow broad beans, for example, and garlic in sunny areas, forest garden environment. Next one, please. Okay, here's some of the Holma forest garden species. In the canopy layer, there's common alders and sweet chestnut. Those are, I think, the most common canopy species. Below, there's bigger bushes like hazel and autumn olive. Autumn olive, Elaeagnus umbellata, and Siberian peat tree, they're both nitrogen-fixing trees. Also, sea buckthorn is one of those kind of fertilizer plants. Sea buckthorn is very good. The berry is very healthy. It has lots of fat, some healthy nutrients. Also, the leaves are useful in tea. Yeah, sweet chestnut, we are really looking forward that the climate change will accelerate. That's a bit well, I can't say that maybe in every situation, but from a gardener's perspective, the climate change is very, let's say, thrilling opportunity, because we can grow new species here. Quite soon we can grow sweet chestnuts in southern Finland in the coming decades. It's not yet reality, but it's coming. Also, autumn olive is interesting plant with edible berries and this nitrogen fixing habit. It's also favored by pollinator species like bees. Ground layer, there's some perennials like hybrid comfrey. That's also favored by bumblebees, and nettles, very useful and nutrient-rich plants that can be used to fertilize the garden. Comfrey is a kind of mythical permaculture forest garden plant. This hybrid comfrey is handy because it doesn't spread by seed. It's a sterile hybrid. It's very fast growing and deep rooted. We can cut it several times a year, and it's rich in potassium. Especially these hybrids have very high potassium content, and we can use that leaf mass to fertilize, for example, apple trees. And nettle is, of course, edible and super healthy wild food that can be incorporated into forest gardens, of course. So you can see the layered structure and some of the useful plants of Holma Forest Garden. Next one, please. You mentioned Holma is used for educational purposes quite a lot. Here's a student picking Tuna sinensis leaves that are good spice plant, and I suppose many of you Central Europeans are quite familiar with this plant. We can grow it as a perennial only if it survives winter, but it's at its best, it's perennial here up these latitudes. So looking forward to have it as a bush or even a tree later. Okay, next one, please. Here's a couple of images from my own forest garden. I started 2010, so 12 years ago. My forest garden is situated in former agricultural land. On the left side, there's still wheat, this kind of field that's cultivated. On the down and up and right side, there's a natural forest. Not like a forest that I'm cutting every now and then, but it's quite in its natural state. This is in southern Finland, and I have surrounded the forest garden area. I'm also doing some research on nut trees and hazelnut bushes, different hazelnut cultivars. So part of the growing system is dedicated to this nut orchard. Next slide, please, shows a more detailed look from air. You can have a bit of an idea about the canopy distances in this picture. I've planted quite many common alder trees, black alders, to fix nitrogen and also build a better microclimate in the garden. But I'm cutting them every now and then. Otherwise, there would be alder forest at some point. So there's some paths, some openings, bigger trees, smaller trees, perennials, ground cover plants. Most of the ground cover layer is the one I sowed in the beginning, like clover and that kind of stuff, but I'm replacing the ground cover with more permanent species. But it's very labor intensive. That's the most, let's say, labor intensive part of the forest garden, is the planting and maintaining, starting the ground cover layer. It's quite easy to plant trees and shrubs, but the ground cover layer it needs lots of plants, like hundreds and hundreds of plants. So propagation is one of the most important skills a forest gardener can have. Next one, please. Yeah, here's a picture from, let's say, 2 months ago from my forest garden. On the ground perennial layer, there's, for example, it's comfrey and edible hosta, some insect plants. Then on the shrub layer, some red currants and red-leaved hazels, normal hazels too, of course. Some heart nuts and walnuts, and some fruit trees mostly. I'm concentrated on nuts, so there's quite a lot of nut trees. Okay, next one, please. Yes, now welcome to Alman. This is an aerial photo from last year, I think. This I hope to see some photos next year or maybe even this year, because we have changed this place quite a lot already. This was the starting point, and this is the area we have been operating. So this year we had 2 courses. First in May, and just last month we had also a weekend course of forest gardening, like about 2-3 day courses. Next one, please. Yeah, but before the courses, there was some planning, and this is some serious sketching and trying to fit many interesting plants to this relatively small space. Yeah, next one, please. So here's Alman's forest garden at the beginning in last May. There's not many leaves on the trees in mid-May here. We are quite north, let's say. But the site is quite good microclimate-wise. On the north side, there's existing vegetation like pine trees, spruce, birches, and maple trees. So it's quite nice environment. So we had this course for about 15 students. There were some beginners and some horticulture students and people who are interested in learning how to plant trees and how to take care of the garden system. Next one, please. So the course was really like hands-on course. We had a theory part, a couple of hours of like background, like what I'm talking now, similar kind of stuff. A bit more about the plants, also these species. I described more in detail how these species work and what kind of benefits different species has. But then the whole Saturday we just basically planted. We found the right spots. We kind of took the plan from paper to the site and marked the placement of each tree and shrub. We did some experiments. We used some newspaper to prevent weeds around the tree so that they don't take over. We had plenty of mulch. We used local compost, bioactive, very good quality soil wood food web certified compost, and some wood chip mulch. Next one, please. Okay, the sweet cherry was in the last picture, and here you can see the mound we made. It's a bit clayey soil, and this sweet cherry is actually on the limits. It maybe survives, it maybe doesn't. We are so north here in Tampere. We can't really grow sweet cherries in every garden. It's not a regular species here. Same is true with walnut. This is true Juglans regia, true walnut. And well, ePlug is a kind of experimental platform. So we were able to, let's say, experiment with this kind of border plants. We're trying to push the boundaries and make these plants to grow here up at this is about 62 latitude, I think, where we are now. We have walnuts in Finland, but maybe only less than 10 are producing walnuts. So that's really rare species. There's some existing plants like apple and small-leaved lime. We added grapevine and bladdernut, another experimental plant, and then hazels and blue honeysuckle is really hardy. There's really nice new cultivars we have here at Alman. Next one, please. Yeah, actually, people enjoyed mostly to this. This was the thing. They wanted to work together. People are really like communal beings. People really enjoy like working together and working for a common goal. I got the best feedback from this kind of thing. But it was really nice to work together. Of course, people wanted to learn about plants, but they really after COVID and all this war thing and everything, people really enjoyed just doing something good, something saving the world together. Yeah. And actually, I welcome you to participate next summer to this forest garden course. We have a English language course and also Finnish language course is coming next year. And I think Kaisa will tell a lot more about them. Yeah, thank you. This was my presentation. You're free to ask questions at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. I think this is a wonderful example, and I'm sure there's somebody who wants to participate already to the English one, maybe. But we haven't set the date yet, but maybe the nice summer, June, could happen in the English version. They could maybe extend this to soil food web course as well, so that these two things that are linked very much together could happen in 1 week. But anyways, questions to Joel, if you have some now, please. We have maybe about 15 minutes left of our scheduled time. So if questions, please. Yes, Amelie, go ahead.
Hello. I sincerely apologize for the dumb question because I don't come from the green sector whatsoever. So I'm discovering your presentation and I'm discovering the concept of edible forest garden. My question is the following. I see that I'm from Belgium, and I see that in Tampere, it basically freezes 6 months a year. How? Yeah, she's laughing. I'm serious. How limited are you with the species you can plant and grow? And I understood well that you're focusing on nuts and berries mostly. But seriously, how limited are you with what you can plant and what grows, or what do you try and doesn't work because of the temperature and the freeze 6 months a year or 5 months a year? Yes.
Okay, thank you, Cecilia. That's a very essential question, but I need to give a bit background. Finland, the average temperature in Finland, that has actually risen already 2.5 degrees since 1850s. 2.5. We are already experiencing that kind of warming. That's a very significant amount. And we are seeing the effects in our garden. Spring is coming more early, and only yesterday there was really like a serious first frost. Normally we experience that in late September already, so it's like a month later than normally. So this is very good for us to get these frosts now, but not early. So this helps. The minimum temperature is not the biggest problem, I think. It's already 10 years since we experienced minus 30 degrees last time. That was 2012. Normally the winter temperatures are between, let's say 18 to 25 here in Tampere in recent years. That limits, of course, but the biggest limitation is the the growing degree days, the temperature sum, we don't get enough heat in summer, because, for example, walnut it tolerates -30, but it needs to be the wood needs to harden during the growing season. But of course, this helps because that autumn freeze comes only now, not in September. But species-wise, some people have grown apricots outdoors in Finland and got some harvest. Sweet chestnuts, I know 2 trees that have produced some chestnuts. And yeah, walnuts, as I mentioned about them. Also hazelnut cultivars, we're experimenting, those big nutted cultivars. We can't grow really quince. In some southwest archipelago, there's a couple of quince trees that are producing quinces. What else? Yeah, we can grow pears, cherries, plums, apples, quite nice stuff. Some are experimenting with peach, but that's not very regular crop. Did I answer your question?
Okay, there were a couple of questions in the chat as well.
Okay.
Can you see the chat, or shall I?
No, sorry, I don't see the chat.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you have
Do you have
some
some
citrus?
citrus? How do you protect those against frost?
So what protect? Which plant?
Citrus.
Citrus plant. Oh, okay. We don't grow any citrus plants outdoors in Finland. That's not possible. So I can't give much advice. But in general, we try to protect plants by giving them as much heat in summer as possible, so that they are hardy. The wood hardens and they tolerate the -degrees in winter. That's kind of a general advice, but no experience with citrus. Sorry.
Yeah. And then there's a question: how do you manage with the deers in Pirkanmaa area? Is it a big problem? I think it might be.
That's a big problem in southwest Finland, especially. We have this white-tailed deer that was brought in 1930s from US. That's a national animal of Honduras. And now we have 100,000 of those deer here. We need to fence them. Essi, please, if you take a couple of slides back, you can see the fence, the net.
Like in here.
Can you, Essi, take a couple of slides back? I don't see this planting picture.
Yeah, sure. Can you see now?
No.
It's over the sweet
Okay.
cherry. Oh,
Our presentation went back, but you can't see it.
Okay, hope you see it, but yeah, we need to put some wire around the plants. That's very important. And here in Alma, we don't have deer, but we have some hare. That's the bigger rabbit.
Yeah.
So 120, 1 meter 50 centimeters. That's quite good height for these kind of fences. We have now fenced almost everything here now. But hunting is also an option, not maybe in Alman, but my own garden, I also hunt deer. That's part of the forest garden gives this way. But I have fence. I have 2 meter high fence in my forest garden. That's how we deal with the deer.
And when we are talking about the e-block project and the urban greening, I think we should talk more about the food production as well, rather than just how do we make nice green roofs or green walls. I think we need to focus also what we are growing in the parks or in the tiny forests or the spaces that we have available. It's not only decorative purposes. I think they should be harnessed with the eating purposes as well. So the food chains become shorter, but also whatever we plant, we can make food out of it. Maybe it's not used, but there is a possibility at least, and gain more awareness. Because I can totally say and raise my hand that I have no knowledge about edible forest garden. I know a couple of plants, but there's been so many new species to me that I definitely am going to participate next year's course. What can be done? What can be eaten? What can I plant in my garden? What can we eat? How much further we can go at Alman? I'm thinking about what is in the soil and what is growing in the soil that looks nice and decorative, but can be eaten as well. So thank you very much, Joel. This is such a good example, and I think such an important topic that I think we need to start talking about this in the ePlot project as well, even more.
Yeah, I'm very happy to hear that, and yeah, thank you, Kaisa and Eva and everyone at Alman invitation. Yeah, let's continue.
One more question.
Yeah.
Can you recommend some literature for a beginner to get into the topic of edible forest gardens? Is there some sort of source Bible that we can all read before you, of course?
Well, I can recommend Martin Crawford's Creating a Forest Garden. That's easily available. That's in English, and Martin has really long experience in growing these kind of systems. There's also a good Swedish book, but that's in Swedish, and my own book about edible forest gardens, that's coming next March. That's in Finnish. It's a small intro book. It's not the Bible, but 100 pages.
Could be. You never know.
And maybe I think there's quite established forest gardens in Netherlands. At least this Kettelbroek. That's one. I don't know if this guy Wouter van Eck has written anything about forest gardens, but check it out. Yeah.
Well, we need to make an excursion there if his garden is able.
Sounds good.
And if those who visited Floriade, maybe you remember there was an agroforest part of the Utopia Island, which was really nice, but it was really kind of in a nice straight lines. So it's not in a decorative in that sense, but it was agroforest example, and I think it was a really good example of it as well. I think this is a topic that we need to raise on our board of educations and courses, and we talk about what is urban green, how do we green the world and make it sustainable. It's not only about the decorative purposes, it's the food as well, and not only for us, it's the ecosystem as well. Any more questions, or do we give it the final applause to Joel? I think this was really good showcase session. Nothing on the chat at the moment.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.